Hi, here we are to continue talking about Express and setting up sort of a social media site, sort of like Reddit with Node and Express. And in the last video, we imported body parser and Express handlebars. These packages act as middleware for Express. So middleware is kind of like adding extra functionality, right? And it kind of goes between the request and the response. So it happens kind of in between, in the middle, we might say, right? And so what we need to do is we need to add those to Express and say, hey, Express, why don't you use this middleware? And when we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to add in, we're going to add this line here. We're going to say app.use. Oops, use, right? And when we do this, we're saying, Express, why don't you use the middleware that we're going to send you right here? And when we do this, the middleware gets processed in the order that it's added. And that also includes these app.get routes that are handled down here. So usually, almost always, you'll want to put your middleware before your routes. So it should come first because Express is going to evaluate the middleware here. Like if I add it here, it's going to do this first before doing this one, right? And usually we'll want the middleware to be processed before we handle a route. Okay, almost always. So let's add some middleware. So essentially, when we get body parser right here, what I want to do is I want to use that to handle data. So I'm going to add that as middleware down here. I'm going to say body parser dot JSON, right? And I'm going to say, hey, app, why don't you use body parser, and then we'll put it in the JSON mode, right? And then let's do another one too. Let's do app.use, and I want to do body parser .url encode or encoded, right? And we'll say extended is false, right? Okay, so we'll set this up. So body parser is going to take in data from forms and things like that in our HTML pages, and we're just going to set up Express and tell it kind of like how to do that, how to handle that data, right? And it's going to attach it to the request object so we can grab it when we get into one of the routes. So, right, so obviously we need to do that before we get to a route. And like I said, this will happen before if we put it up here before we set up the route. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to set up Express handlebars, right? So Express handlebars is a little bit different. What we'll do is we'll say app.engine, and Express handlebars is a templating system. So what it'll do is it'll let us write code in sort of a template language. Looks a lot like HTML, but it'll have some placeholders for variables so we can insert data into the template, and then we can send the template with the new data inserted to the browser. So essentially we can mock up web pages without the actual content and then add the content when someone makes a request to a route. Okay? You'll see how that works in a little bit. So what we want to do here is we want to set up the engine, and we want to set the file extension that we're going to use. You can actually use this in another mode without all these options, but I like to do this so that the file extension is just .hbs, right? And that's kind of short and easy to type. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say Express HBS. This is the name that we used up here, and we'll say Express HBS, and then we'll put an object in here. And this object has some options, so we can say like how we're going to configure this thing. And what I want to do is I want to say extension name is .hbs. And what else? Let's do default layout is main. Okay. And we'll talk more in detail about handlebars in a minute, and we'll set up some folders and create some templates. But this default layout lets us define a default template. So all the pages will share this template. So this template can have, our base HTML code in it, and links to our JavaScript and CSS styles and stuff like that, right? So that's kind of better to keep that all in one file, and then we can add other templates to this file. So this will be sort of our root template, right? And so anyway, so we've got this kind of set up, but we'll have to do one more thing to get it working. We'll have to say app.set, and then we're going to say, what is it, view engine, and then we need to say what view engine we're using, HBS, I think, right? There we go, right? So we got app use body parser, app use body parser URL and code, and then app engine.hbs, right? And then we're going to set the view engine to this .hbs right there. And we'll do all this before we get to the routes down here, okay? So anyway, thanks for watching. Then we'll continue in the next video, and this will have set up our most of the middleware that we're going to use to get our pages working.